Level up your LA Kings experience with the new Vivid Seats Elite Seats. All the on-ice Kings action with even more exclusive access. Enjoy great seats to the game along with premier dining inside the Lexus Club with all-you-can-eat food and non-alcoholic beverages. Plus, get a free Team LA Kings item and parking with your purchase. Score your Vivid Seats Elite Seats tickets today and earn rewards on each purchase from the only ticket company that rewards you for buying. Experience it live with Vivid Seats, the official partner of the LA Kings.
You're listening to an LA Kings podcast. For more episodes of this and every other Kings program, visit lakings.com/podcast.
You're listening to All the Kings Men, the official podcast of the LA Kings. Now, here's your host, Jesse Cohen.
We are continuing our player evaluation series. Joining me today, Daryl Evans. How are you doing today, Daryl?
I'm great, Jess. How you doing?
I'm good, thank you, all things considered. Ordinarily, we would go through and do like a very sort of, separated conversation about the three players I want to talk today. But because these three players, and I think people will realize why in a second, because these three players sort of had so much overlap between the three of them, I'm not going to expect our conversation to stay limited to one or the other at any given moment.
Okay.
And I want to talk about Vladislav Gavrikov, Mikey Anderson, and Drew Doughty. And ordinarily, we would talk about, like I said, defensemen in an individual way. But Mikey Anderson basically spent the season splitting his time between the two, Gavrikov and Doughty. Doughty missed at least half the season with his injury. And Gavrikov switched sides to join Mikey Anderson on the top pair. So I guess we'll start out with Mikey Anderson. I've seen a list recently that listed him as one of the top 10 defensive defensemen in the NHL. And I understand why people, who have big expectations might push back on that label. But if you go and just sort of look at his effectiveness, from a statistical standpoint, I don't think there's much argument that Mikey Anderson is one of the best defensive defensemen in the National Hockey League this past season.
No, I think when you look at his game and his growth over the last number of years, first of all, he had the luxury of playing with Drew Doughty right off the bat.
Yep.
And Drew got matched up against the top teams, the other team's top players, so that put Mikey Anderson right in the fire right off the bat. And it was kind of, you had to learn right off the bat, and I think he did. I think he adjusted well. And what he's done over the last few years, he's taken the knowledge that he's gained each game, the experience that he's had, and he's applied it to the next time he steps on the ice. He's got a great book on the league now. He understands the top players, what their strengths are, where their weaknesses are, what his strengths and weaknesses are against them, and how he has to play against them. He's really added to his value because of his ability to play with more than one player in Drew Doughty. I think everybody thought that, Drew Doughty made Mikey Anderson. Well, that might have been the case at the beginning, but I think Mikey Anderson now, he can stand on his own out there. He's a player that players want to play with. There's a lot of trust from the coaching staff and from his teammates. So I think Mikey's really growing nicely as a player, and he's become a top player in the league, and not surprised in being having be looked upon like that as one of the top 10 defenders.
I just kind of chose 1,000 minutes arbitrarily. And this past season, there were 138 defensemen that played over 1,000 minutes at even strength in the National Hockey League. And in goals against per 60 minutes played, Mikey Anderson was third in the league. And like you say, with Drew Doughty out of the lineup. Now, I just feel like because he's not 6'5", and because defensemen don't generally play the way that they did in like the late 90s or early 2000s, right? Like we don't have a lot of Hatcher brothers running around the league. That for some reason Mikey Anderson doesn't get credit for being that effective. But I mean, this year, Gavrikov got a lot of pub for playing, the minutes that he did, but Mikey Anderson was right there alongside him. No, I mean, the two of them were an excellent top pair in Drew Doughty's absence.
Yeah, I think Mikey, we saw his minutes get elevated. They've gone up each year in the critical games. He was playing in all the key situations out there. And then taking on a new partner in Gavrikov, and not only a new partner, but a partner that really was playing an uncomfortable position, playing as offside. I think a lot of credit has to be given to Mikey because of the trust that Gavrikov had with him, knowing exactly where he's going to be. Mikey's the type of guy that's very predictable to his teammates. They know exactly where he's going to be, what he's capable of doing, and he goes out and he executes. So having him sit there at that number 3 position with 1,000 minutes does not surprise me in that regard because he is so reliable. He's one of those guys that sometimes will just kind of fly under the radar, but you can always trust he's going to be in the right spot. Not the biggest guy, not necessarily the strongest, not the best skater, but it's his hockey IQ that allows him to get to the right spot at the right time to be able to defend when he has to and defend as far away from his net as he possibly can.
He gets talked about, and this is something that I have seen personally in the locker room, in scrums and one-on-one conversations. But one of the strengths that gets mentioned is that his compete level is incredibly high, right? And we hear stories about him and his brother growing up, and they would invent these contests, to sort of prove that they were, could one up each other. I think one of those stories was like they would throw water balloons over their house and, catch them in the front yard and the backyard and whatever. But for a player like him who doesn't, it's not that he's small, but he's not, like I said, he's not 6'5" or 6'4". He's not 240 pounds. He's not throwing around his weight. He's using his hockey IQ. So when you have a defenseman who patrols the blue line the way he does, who's good on gap control, and who has high hockey IQ, as a viewer, as an evaluator, how do you measure competitive level when you're watching a player like him?
Well, I think when you look at his compete, again, he plays bigger than his size out there. He's got a lot of will in his game. When he gets into those one-on-one battles in the corners, he's giving it all he possibly has. Does he get out battled a couple of times? Of course he does. Everybody does. The best of guys do. The biggest of guys do. But for the most part, and that'll continue to keep growing as he plays more games, again, his positioning, his physical strength, this offseason, the things that he does, the way he'll approach the game next year. He learned a lot from his game last year, and he knows he's got to be better again to take that next step because he and his teammates weren't happy with the way things finished off. So everybody's got to contribute a little bit. To say that Mikey Anderson is given all that he's possibly capable of, no, I still think there's growth in his game. But if he continues to keep moving at the pace that he's at right now, he's going to continue to keep getting better and add to his value. But Mikey Anderson's a very valuable player to his team, to his coaches. He's very trustworthy. From day one, the Kings have talked about him wearing a letter one day for the Kings. I still think that's something we're going to see in the near future, his leadership qualities. And that has to do both on and off the ice. So Mikey Anderson, again, he'll find a way. He's a student of the game. He doesn't claim to know it all, and he'll continue to keep his eyes and his ears open, listen, study the league, study the top players. And, when he improves against the top players, that's going to be a way that he can measure, use as a measuring stick for himself. He knows how good he is and what he's capable of doing. But at the end of the day, a lot of things are measured on the success of the hockey club. And, the Kings have not had the success that they want. Mikey Anderson being part of the team. Once that team takes its game to the next level, then I think you're going to see a lot more reward going his direction. But Mikey Anderson, in my opinion, he's one of those guys, again, that flies under the radar and has great value to this team. And I think greater than it's ever been because of what he did this year, the increased ice time, the key situations, the critical situations that he was playing in, and not playing with Drew Doughty. He could go out there. He can play on his own now. So he can carry himself. He can carry a pair. With a couple of young guys on the other side, guys like Clark and Spence, would not be surprised to see Mikey Anderson get teamed up with one of those guys in the near future just because the trust that they have in his game.
Mikey Anderson, not known for the offensive side of his game. He's never going to be power play one, probably never going to be power play two. But he did set career highs this past season in goals, assists, and points. 6 goals, 18 assists, 24 points in 77 games. Like I said, he doesn't get any power play time. That's just not his role. He does get penalty kill time, but what can he do, or even should he even worry about improving his offensive contributions moving forward?
I think those are going to evolve naturally, Jess. I think when you've seen like his numbers have, slowly gone up this past year with career highs, a little bit more trust in his own game. And I think with the personnel that the Kings have added, there's a lot more offense in the game. The systems that they play, the coaches encourage him to become more active via the rush or off the cycle in the offensive zone. And because of his instincts, he knows when to go and when to jump up, when to join the attack, and when to become involved in the offensive zone. There's probably times that he could probably even risk a little bit more. And I think that'll continue to just keep coming as he gets more comfortable doing it. So just like the rest of his numbers, I think there's still growth in the offensive part of his game. Whether or not he makes himself out to the power play, I don't think that's ever anything that's on his mind out there. He's a defender. I think he takes a lot of pride in that part of his game, and that's what he's known for. But if he can add just a little bit more from that backside, and I think he will because of the flair that the Kings play with now, I think you'll see his numbers improve again and get up over that 30-point plateau this year.
All right, let's talk about Drew Doughty then. Drew Doughty got hurt in the preseason, and I didn't know what to expect, when he would be back, what he would look like when he came back. He wound up playing 30 games in the regular season, 4 goals, 13 assists, 17 points, plus 9. He came back. He played most of his minutes with Mikey Anderson, but not all of his minutes with Mikey Anderson when he returned. They played 295, give or take, minutes at even strength once he came back. Were you expecting him to be a regular minutes player when he returned from his injury?
Well, I think the fact that he stepped in and he was preparing to play for the Four Nations Cup and all that type of thing. When Drew Doughty came back, he wasn't coming back just to become a passenger. Mm-hmm. He was coming back to be Drew Doughty. To be that player that leads the team in ice time, that plays in all the critical situations. And I think we saw bits of that. He went through a very difficult injury with, a real strong rehab. I think one thing that he learned a lot about himself through this injury. He's had some pretty tough injuries the last couple of years, but I think he's probably trained harder and more creatively and smartly over the last few years to keep himself playing at a high level at this stage of his career. And I think that's what's going to, stretch his career out. Is because of what he's learned about himself and the training part of the game. So, when Drew Doughty came back, I mean, there were some games that, he looked, like Drew Doughty. And then there's some other games that, he looked like he was, that he was, whether you want to call it nursing an injury or feeling some uncomfort or discomfort, he was doing that. So I think this summer is very important for him. He's got to, rehabilitate a little bit still. And then he's got to get himself strong. I think anytime you go through a surgery like that he had, you're looking at 12 to 18 months for complete recovery. And, as you get on in your career, I think that those numbers are pretty true. We've seen it with players that are younger. So I would expect Drew to be better again this year, even though he's going to be a year older than he started last year. I expect him to be better because of the training that he's going to put in, the will that he has, and just, again, another guy with a great hockey IQ. Should he be playing the minutes that he's played throughout his career? Those numbers probably have to come down. And in order for those guys to come down, other guys have to elevate their game. I think Drew understands that if these other guys, step forth and, the coaching staff and the team has the trust in them, then, they deserve those minutes. But until that time comes, it was just like the same things with Kopitar and Brown and those guys that, somebody's got to take my ice time. And that's the same to be said with Drew. He'll want to play those minutes and his head's in the right place. I just think that as Drew continues to keep playing on in the latter part of his career, he'll have more impact. And I'm not saying you're cutting his minutes back drastically, but if you can pick up, a couple of minutes a game through the course of the year, then when it comes to critical time going down, the playoff stretch and things like that into the postseason, he'll have a little bit more left in the tank. And I think that'll be a factor coming into this year. And of course, last year, we all know that, he missed 50 games. So when he came back, he was trying to do a lot of catch up. And unfortunately, you just can't keep playing catch up. You saw how limited his time was to practice at the end of the year. He couldn't get on the ice and practice with the guys. So I think that affected his overall play as well. But I know that he'll be prepared both mentally and physically. He'll be in the right place to start this next season. And that's exactly where the Kings need him.
It's so funny when we talk about time in hockey, because on the one hand, time, we experience it at the same rate that it happens. So we're talking about 5 years worth of playoff results, and it's 5 years, right? It feels like 5 years because it is. But then you look at how many games it is And max, you're talking about what, 20 something to 30 games? So it's like not even that big a deal. So you're talking about how many minutes a game Drew Doughty plays. I'm looking back on it, 2014-15, he was averaging 28 minutes and 60 seconds. Last year, he averaged 24 minutes and 8 seconds. That's it's a significant drop. But last year, 25-48. The year before that, 26-14. It's not a huge drop from one year to the next. But you're right. Night after night, game in and game out. And, there were some nights, obviously he was nursing that injury, but there were 2 games in the 30 that he played this season where I think he played under 20 minutes, which, if I'm not mistaken, is like the first time that's happened since 2011 or something like that. But yeah, I mean, obviously, when a player reaches a certain age, you want to preserve their ability to play. I don't remember how long Chris Chelios, I don't remember how many minutes he was playing a night at the end of his career when he was in his mid-40s. But I mean, I've heard people suggest that Drew Doughty could have a career like that.
Yeah, I think, and Drew's preparing himself to play like that. And I think that's where it has to start. First of all, it's got to be the mental approach. You've got to want to do it. You've got to have that passion to do it. Drew, I think because of the injuries that he's had over the last few years, not coming to the rink and being with the guys every day, he's really missed that. That's something that he cherishes. He loves being part of the group. He's a vocal part of the team. He's a character in the locker room, and everybody misses him when he's not around. So I think he understands that, but he has a passion right now that I know you want to take it, short term, but I think he's committed to himself now with the workouts, the way that he's trained his body, that he wants to stretch his career out longer than the contract that he's on. And as long as the player, like that, the experience that he's had, the capabilities that he has, he can do it. Sometimes the role changes a little bit, but he's going to have to understand that. I think because of the amount of time that he's missed now recently, he is starting to slowly understand that. So it could be kind of a blessing in disguise, these injuries, as to stretching his career out, because I think he's training better than he ever did. Of course, the science and the medicine part of the game, that continues to improve each time, and he's in the best of care with the Kings training staff. I know that Chris Kingsley and the staff, the rehabilitation center there at Keck Medicine, they do an outstanding job with him and making him feel the best that he possibly can. So I think there's a lot left in the tank for Drew Doughty.
I'm going to ask you to speculate a little bit, and I apologize in advance. Trying to piece together Kings history, and when Todd McClellan was brought in, the Kings had a very specific skill set available to them, on their roster based on players that were in the organization and on the roster. And whether it was management requesting Todd McClellan to adapt his system to the 1-3-1, or whether it was Todd McClellan proposing the 1-3-1, either way, we heard in various conversations with coaches and front office members that the 1-3-1 and that approach to the game was sort of decided on based on players that were available, right? Like based on the strengths of the players available, we think we should play this system. And then over time, the decision was made to acquire more players that fit that system rather than trying to change the system. It's a very long-winded way of saying you have Drew Doughty. You have Drew Doughty, who's capable of playing more than 20 minutes, 22, 23, 24 minutes a night. He has a very specific skill set. He has a player in Mikey Anderson that he's very comfortable playing with. And they are, in effect, to be clear, like they are an incredibly effective shutdown pair. They may not put up 100 points like some of the, Makar or Carlson or whoever, but Anderson and Doughty, just as far as goals allowed, they're incredibly effective as a pair. So moving forward, how much influence does having those players like that in place have on general managers, coaches, etc., who they could, like, if you want to groom a player to replace Drew Doughty and you want to groom a type of player who plays a totally different game than Drew Doughty, in order to help that player play that game, maybe you go to a different system, but doing that might not serve Drew Doughty and Mikey Anderson's best interest. Am I making any sense, or am I just rambling?
No, I understand what you're saying. I think the Kings have a system in place now. The system has evolved over the last few years. You look at Rob Blake, the drafts that they've gone through, the trades that they've made, the free agent signings, they've added a skill set that wasn't with the club for the years prior to that. A lot more skill. The players that they've drafted, instead of drafting the guys that were 6'6", 6'7", 250 pounds, they added some more speed and some more skill. And we're starting to see that in the young players that are evolving. Like, Quentin Byfield, we'll start with him. I mean, you look at the offense that he's taken upon himself. So when you've got a guy like that up front, you've got to have a defenseman or multiple defensemen that can get him the puck and move and come up the play with him. I think the Kings have done that. The guys that they've added back in the blue line, Jordan Spence and then Brant Clark now, there's a lot more potential offense coming from the blue line with those guys' ability to carry the puck and to jump up and become involved in the offensive zone. And other guys, there's a little bit of a blend there. Mikey Anderson's numbers might not be quite as high as you'd like to see them. But again, he's one of those guys, he's on the shutdown pair along with Doughty. And let's face it, Drew Doughty, his entire career, he's always prided himself on defending before, putting up the points and things like that. So I think that's rubbed off on Mikey Anderson. And I still think we're going to see a little bit more offense come out of Mikey. And Drew's offense is going to come as well. And Drew might find some more of his offense coming via 5-on-5, not necessarily as much on the power play as he did in the early part of his career because of the way things have evolved with the man advantage, that he might not get all that primary number one power play time, or for a lot of times that we saw Drew play 90 seconds of a power play. That's going to get distributed a little bit more differently. But I think the Kings, the way they're playing the game, there's more, they targeted it as that one of the needs a few years ago was they needed offense from the defense. And it didn't just necessarily mean goals. It was breaking a puck out clean, getting involved off the rush, getting the puck in the offensive zone, becoming involved in the cycle. And, the Kings are more of a puck possession team as opposed to a dump and chase team. And I think that'll continue to keep growing because the younger guys, more confidence coming from them, and there's more skill. The Kings skate, collectively better as a group than they ever have. This team that the Kings put together, Rob Blake put together this past year, it was an unfortunate thing that they got beat out in the first round of the playoffs because they deserved a better fate. They beat themselves in that series against the Oilers. And I don't think we had a really good, way to measure how good this team was without them having success in the postseason. They had a hell of a year, and unfortunate things didn't go the way they wanted in the matchup they had against the Oilers. But I still think there was a lot of strides made in the right direction with the way that they're playing the game.
Have you, by any chance, seen the breakout saucer pass from Jared Woolley in the Memorial Cup from yesterday or 2 days ago?
I have not. No.
So ironically, he is 6'5", and was drafted and is known for his defense. But he sends a pass from behind his own goal line. It's probably 4 or 5 feet up off the ice, and hits a teammate just directly in front of the red line, who then the play.
Are you sure he wasn't just clearing it out, Jess?
No, 100%. You should. It's a really impressive play. He doesn't get an assist on it because about 5 other guys touch the puck before they score. But the Knights did score a goal. But again, it's funny because he is 6'5" and not known for that kind of pass.
Well, I think too, when you look at the development team, even the kids as they come up and get drafted now, these kids have a great skill set. They're exposed to everything. When you look at a third and a fourth line, they're not jump and chase guys anymore. You're getting contributions from third and fourth lines, and that's throughout the league. So I think that'll continue as we move forward. And again, these guys are going to be big just because man has gotten bigger over the years anyway. That we're going to see these big kids come in, but it's not something that you have to target. You have to look at the compete. You have to look at the skating ability and all those things. So I think you look at the best package possible, but the Kings will not turn their back on skill and compete in their game. And I think it's evident in a couple of players that maybe aren't necessarily the biggest, guys like Trevor Moore. You look at his compete, and he's not a big guy, but he gets right in there. Kevin Fiala's got a lot of fight in his game. He's not a big body either.
So let's talk about Vladislav Gavrikov. He played 841 minutes with Mikey Anderson. And Daryl, I got to tell you, when Drew Doughty went down with an injury, Gavrikov would have been the last of, not that there were a ton of names on the list because they only had so many players available to them, but his name probably would have been last. Well, maybe not last, but second to last, third to last of options to play alongside Anderson on the right side. I thought, okay, Spencer Clark will get moved up. They'll have to bring up, Kyle Burroughs to fill a spot. Maybe, who knows, maybe Anderson and Burroughs. But I just assumed it would be a right shot defenseman. I didn't think they would go with a left shot defenseman, and I didn't think it would be Vladislav Gavrikov, but the two of them played 841 minutes together. They were only on the ice for 1.64 goals against per 60. And Gavrikov was selected by the media as the best defensive player, and I think a lot of people thought he was the MVP.
No, there's a lot of things that he did right. It was maybe a little bit of a blessing in disguise for him with the injury to Drew. On a personal thing, he's coming up into a contract year, and we know he took a bridge deal in his last deal to set himself up for this one. So his ice time got elevated. He got put in critical situations. He got put on that top pairing with Mikey Anderson and with regards to a shutdown situation, and he excelled at it. He did a really good job. He also showed the versatility to be able to play the right side. Of course, he's stronger on the left, like most people are. But again, an option for a team, when you got a guy with that ability that can play in those situations against the top players and play either side, that's a great thing to have out there. But Gavrikov, even when the Kings acquired him, his ability to be able to defend at the blue line, stick checks, a very active stick, he's a big guy that I don't want to say he doesn't play physical, but he's not one of those guys that just absolutely crushes you out there. He gets in the way all the time. And I think being in a situation where he was this year, playing on that top line, he learned to, play heavier against the other team's top players. So, again, a little bit of a blessing in disguise for him. The Kings got a really good chance to, as he comes into this contract negotiation, as to where they sit with him. How much do they want to commit to him? How many years do they want to commit to him? What are his capabilities? Where is his ceiling? And I think he definitely raised his ceiling with his play this year. He took on more minutes. There didn't seem like there was a fall off in his play. So Gavrikov, along with the other guys that we've talked about today, and Mikey Anderson and Drew Doughty, they've got great value on this hockey club, and they play a very important part. And a lot of it is to do with the system that the Kings play, with the structure that they play defensively. These are three guys that you can trust, and Gavrikov has done a great job at earning that trust, both on the left and the right side.
I don't think there's any question that it was a blessing in disguise for him personally, because, like you mentioned, the contract year. I mean, he must have earned himself an extra $2 or $3 million a year just on that play. I've never really believed in the idea that a player could realize that it was a contract year and therefore just turn it on and be like, oh, I'm going to try harder this year and not in other years. Do you believe in that kind of thing?
No, I don't think players, you want to sit there and say, turn it on.
Mm-hmm.
I think you've got to be in the right situation, which proved to be the right situation for Gavrikov, being that he got an elevated role on the team, that he played on a top pair against the other team's top players to get a really good evaluation as to where he is. And not only did he meet the challenge, he succeeded. He excelled with that challenge. I think when it does come to a contract year, again, he's a player that's already playing with comfort. He knows he's got a contract next year. Whether it's in LA or wherever he wants to go, he's got a contract. He's already earned that contract. It's just a matter of how much is that contract going to be worth. And of course, when you're talking about the amount of money that these guys make today, that's not going to change his lifestyle wherever he decides or whatever he decides he wants to sign for. He's not going to sign for what he did, less than what he did last year. So he was making a good living last year, and that's not going backwards. So he's in a good spot there. So I think there's some comfort there. I think sometimes in guys, when their career's a little bit up and down, you might see a little bit of an elevation because there's a desperation and an urgency. But I think there's been a pretty good consistency with Gavrikov's career, the type of player that he is. If anything, it elevated a little bit, but I still think the foundation of what the player is built upon is still there with Gavrikov, has been consistent, and that's what's going to help him earn the contract that he's going to get this year.
He's 6'3", 220 pounds. He has an active stick. He's great on the blue line. They call him the Octopus, which is a nickname I wish it had stuck more, but it hasn't. He's drafted in the 6th round in 2015. He plays in Columbus for 4 or 5 years. When he's traded to LA at the trade deadline a few years ago, all of the articles I read from all of the, big brain analytics people were, this is a bad idea. This is a bad match. He's not that kind of defenseman. LA is overpaying for a guy that's sort of, mid tier. Like, he's fine, but, I don't really understand this. He comes to LA. He's paired with Matt Roy. They instantly become a great pair. They play 90 games together, give or take, maybe almost 100 games together. They're a fantastic pair. Matt Roy departs. Drew Doughty goes down. Gavrikov gets the opportunity, and Kings fans look at him and go, yeah, okay, we'll see. And then he winds up putting in an unbelievable performance, filling in for Drew Doughty. Like, what is it about the assembled hockey world, and I include myself in this, what is it that none of us have ever figured out how valuable he is? Because he's been underappreciated, it seems like, since he was a teenager.
I think a lot of times, everybody has the habit. They look immediately at statistics. When they see big dollars go towards a player, he's got to be a producer offensively. Mm-hmm. And what you have to do, and I think where it comes to when a team, general manager, the staff, everybody in place, when you value your player, it's what he means to your team. Gavrikov, in his case, he fit into the Kings system. The Kings played a real strong defensive style of hockey. He complemented that. A bigger body, something that they needed a little bit of size back on the blue line. They needed a left-handed shot. They had an abundance of right-handed shots on the left side. The right side, as we've seen a number of guys over the last few years, guys like Dursey, Walker, Roy, all those guys have gone from that side of the ice. So they were looking to fill on the other side, and Gavrikov filled that void that they needed. Turned out immediately when he came in the locker room, his personality just jumped to the forefront. He's a great team player. He embraced everybody in the team. The team embraced him. That allowed him to succeed, and he's growing now in that role in the team and what he means to the team. So that's where the value comes for. I think a lot of times when you just measure statistics and you go, it doesn't seem like it's worth it. There's guys that make more money and there's guys that make less money doing certain jobs, but it's the fit that they have with the team, where that team is with their salary cap at that particular time, and you have to work with it. So you have to trust the powers that be that they're making the right decisions. And in the case with Gavrikov, it turned out to be a great decision by the Kings to make that move. Not only he was able to impact the hockey club, he's made other guys on the team better players, and I think will continue to do so with his next contract. But he's a very valuable player to this team. He knows the league well, and he's got a burning passion to want to have success, and do better, have success in the postseason. So those are the type of players that you want moving forward.
If we remove Darcy Kemper's name from the conversation, where do you have him? We won't worry about one, ranking lists, but like top tier lists, where do you have him as far as his importance to the Kings' performance last year?
Are you talking as a defenseman?
Well, no, sure.
I'm just being smarty. No, you know what? I don't think you can understate what Darcy Kemper meant to the hockey club last year. He had to come to an environment that allowed him to really focus upon his game. And those were almost, the first words out of his mouth when coming back to the Kings was he trusted their system. He liked the system that they played. The players were very predictable. And to the players' side of things, they did not let him down. They were very predictable. But Darcy Kemper got a chance to kind of, rejuvenate himself, focused really upon his own game. I think Michael Buckley did a great job with him at, tweaking some little nuances in his own game. But I think Darcy understood well the way the team played, what was expected of him. And he did a good job at managing his body, at his age, through the course of the season to keep himself healthy and play as many games as he did. But he did a great job at standing tall. And it's not like a type of year that you sit there and he was making all these acrobatic and, highlight reel type of saves. It was his positioning and his knowledge of the opposition he's playing against, who's out there, who's shooting, his left shot, right shot, what are their natural tendencies, go stick, go glove. I think he did a great job. He's got a good book on the players in the league because of the experience that he has. So his value to the hockey club was great because I think it really allowed everybody else, especially with the absence of Drew Doughty at the beginning of the year, a lot of pressure you thought was going to be put upon him, but he just kind of eased that pressure by just coming in and making the saves that he needed to make. And very seldom through the course of the year can you sit there and point the finger at Darcy Kemper and say, "Oh, that was a soft one. That was a soft one. That one cost us the game." That wasn't the case with Darcy. He made the saves that he had to make, and every once in a while he'd come up with some great ones, and that allowed the Kings to succeed the way they did and give them the confidence they did, especially on home ice. You look at the numbers that he put in, franchise best winning streak and all that. It's just phenomenal numbers. And again, you look at it, he does it at his stage of his career. So it's one of those things that if you put your time in, you do your work, you work on your skills and your talents, you're going to be able to play at a high level. And there's no reason that Darcy Kemper can't come back and continue to keep playing at that level, and the guys in front of him to continue to improve as well.
Well, Daryl, I appreciate your time as always. Thanks very much, and we'll talk to you soon.
Look forward to it, Jess. Keep up the great work, young man.